And now it's my pleasure, and I actually have a written introduction here that I'm going to read because I will not remember everything I want to say about this. So I hope that you will forgive me in reading it. It gives me great pleasure to be able to welcome you here for this inaugural talk in this newly renovated space that we have rightly named in honor of our friend, colleague, and mentor, Tom Hallam. There are at least 3 characteristics of highly successful faculty members that really allow them to stand apart, and Tom is an exemplar of these. First, he is a wonderful researcher who has throughout his career constantly been adding to our understanding of how the world works, both in terms of fundamental issues of mathematics and in applications. One aspect of this is the intention and capacity to take off in completely new directions. Tom has reinvented himself several times following his mathematical beginnings, finding himself drawn first to basic theory in population and community ecology, then to fundamental and applied issues in ecotoxicology, and more recently to basic issues in bat biology. Throughout, he has realized the necessity to really develop intuition in the biology in order to impact biology, and has developed lasting collaborations that have expanded the insight developed in the research far more than could be done by any individual alone. I and many others have taken our cues in our interdisciplinary efforts from Tom. Second, Tom has kindly and diligently devoted enormous effort to assist others as a mentor to many students of quite varying abilities and to numerous colleagues, including me. He has the wherewithal to realize when someone needs a push, the compassion to know how hard to push, and the personal connection with each of those he has assisted to know when to hold back and to let them find their own path. His many students will attest to his continuing concern for their well-being throughout their careers and the loving way he has encouraged and assisted them. Third, Tom is a real mensch in that he has given unstintingly of his time and energy in many ways to develop mathematical biology as a profession, to help people all over the world enhance their careers in this area, and to build the foundations here at UTK that have led to NIMBUS and to an outstanding program in EEB. The Trieste courses were perhaps the most significant of the outreach efforts that Tom founded and led, but he's made a great many trips to places all over the world to provide advice and offer his special personal guidance. The last thing Tom needed to do when his health problems arising from the Trieste experience were becoming more severe was to take on a major new responsibility as head of EEB, but he did it anyway. And we became stronger as a faculty because of his capacity for thoughtful leadership and seemingly endless capacity to tolerate administrative hassles and campus administrators. I am very honored to have had Tom's support and guidance throughout my career, and I'm so happy that he has graciously agreed to give us some recollections today. Tom, would you come up? I do have a little thing for you, too.
Before you say any more, I had a good friend who, at an occasion such as this, a retirement dinner, after an introduction such as that, that's unbelievable, Lou, he lied a lot.
No, not at all.
That got up and said thank you and sat down. Thank you, Lou.
Nice try. So this is a little bit of something to hang. You can open it now or later if you want. And I will leave you a copy of this because Rachel will want it, even if she will not.
That was an unbelievable introduction, Lou. Thank you.
Sure.
And,
I purposely did that so that you wouldn't easily be able to open it.
Isn't that beautiful? Can you hear me? Oh, the Hallam Auditorium, the sign outside. How nice, Lou. Thank you very much. Well, I'm amazed, and this is an honor, a very high honor, which is given to me by my colleagues, and I am eternally grateful. I don't deserve it, but thank you all anyway. I regularly remind Lou that I deem it a fantastic honor that this auditorium carries my name, and I think it's only appropriate that the auditorium, when it was named, was in deep need of renovation, as was I. And I think we have both survived well, and so it's a great pleasure to be here. You academics will probably not recognize a crew in the back, but I have members of my family back there, and thank you all for coming. I warned them that there might be 6 or 7 people here, so they might be the majority. But thank you all for coming. It's a great honor. So first of all, I'm going to talk about some historical recollections of the many years I've been in academics, and in particular some about mathematics and computational biology here at University of Tennessee. I'm going to talk about faculty and graduate students, not all the faculty nor all the graduate students, but anyway, I hope to give you some perspective on what has gone on in the years that we have been here. And about a year ago, my desktop computer had a hard disk crash, and so I lost a lot of my social materials, which I had not saved. So I don't have any pictures from those days, and I've gone on the web. Some of the web pictures are not so great, but they're fuzzy, but some of them will work. And my dates may not be accurate, but undoubtedly I will have forgotten someone and some things, and my apologies to those who are not mentioned and to those who are mentioned. First of all, I am prejudiced. I like this place, and the people here, both past and in the present. I've been here almost forever. Had requests to go elsewhere, in particular from as far away as Australia, and even from as close as this university. So I did not care to leave, but I've been in academia for, as I mentioned, for an extended period of time, mathematical ecology and computational biology for a while. And to give you an idea about what extended and a while means, I did my first programming on a computer using punch cards. Some of you are so young you won't remember what that means, but that was the way one had to do to get started. So one appreciation I did have out of that first course was to develop a dislike for hand computation. So this will be probably a different type of talk than you're used to hearing and will hear at NIMBUS. Certainly one more idiosyncratic and personal from an academic perspective than I care to give, but I'm going to do it anyway. I'm from a very different academic age, the 60s, when the interesting times were to be a graduate student because Sputnik had flown. Sergei had a hand in that. And it turns out that money for science was abundant. When I finished my PhD, I went on 2 interviews. one to Kansas City to a consulting company, and one to Florida State University, and I ended up with 4 offers. Things were nice in those days. I got 2 offers without even interviewing from places, and they were good schools. Nebraska, for one. Okay, when I took one of those offers from Florida State University, FSU, and according to football coach Steve Spurrier, FSU stands for Free Shoes University. Well, I was there for 12 years, and I never got any free shoes, so I left. When Tennessee was looking for someone in differential equations, they had a good differential equations group here at the time, and also to start some interactions with the Environmental Sciences Division at Oak Ridge. They contacted me to apply. I did, and I got the job. I'm old enough to shake a bit, folks, but I'm also taking medications that really cause the shake, so apologize for that. I got the job and came to campus in 1977 after spending 1976 at the University of Georgia at the Institute of Ecology there, and also in the math department. So when I was at the University of Georgia, I went to a talk at the Institute of Ecology, and Frank McCormick was there to talk about his research and also about the graduate program in ecology at Tennessee. Well, I had, that was just a program at that time. It was not an academic department. And when the question and answer period came up, I held up my hand and said, what is going on in mathematical ecology at the University of Tennessee? Well, Frank wasn't here when I interviewed. He had never met me, and he responded along these lines. He said, nothing right now. We do have some contacts with Oak Ridge National Lab, but we're trying really hard to hire an important professor from Florida State University. And Bernie Patton, who is an outstanding systems ecology professor at the University of Georgia, was sitting next to me, and he looked over and he said in a very loud voice, "Is he talking about you?" And I nodded and stood up and introduced myself to Frank and apologized for doing such a despicable thing. And anyway, it was nice to know how badly I was wanted, and I ended up here, and Frank, I don't understand why, but he welcomed me very much to the University of Tennessee. In those days, at Oak Ridge National Lab Environmental Sciences Division, there was a really special group in theoretical ecology. Let me read these off so I can make sure I don't slight anybody that I've remembered. Don DeAngelis was there. Don has had interactions with this group for a long period of time, a group here at UT. Bob O'Neill, Hank Schugert, Steve Bartell, Bob and, well, Hank is now at the University of Virginia. Bob is retired. Steve Bartell still has a consulting company, but it's in Maryville, I think, as well as others and who appreciated and used the theory. The late Pat Mulholland, who we have a scholarship in EEB named after him, contributed by his family. Sig Christensen, who's still at the lab, I think, Chuck Utant, late Bob Luxmore, and Art Stewart, among others. Many of the early contributors in mathematical ecology were physicists, engineers, and not so much in mathematics, but a few. And Don DeAngelis was a physicist and is still active. Robert May is another physicist that you probably have heard his name. Bob May was at Princeton at the time, and he decided he was from Australia, but decided he wanted to get back to the British Isles and move to England. And it was actually kind of funny. The Princeton administration wanted to keep Bob at Princeton, and they offered to lower his salary to what he was getting to move to England if he would stay. So, well, in terms of the mathematical and computational ecology faculty and programs, I'm going to give you a rough chronology of that. So, who's this? Well, started out in the math department. We did not have a large number of people interested in biology. It turned out that Ed Clark was there. Ed was a delight, and he's an algebraist by education, but he was interested in applying matrix theory to population models and had some really nice results, and he participated with the group regularly. Turns out there were lots of mathematically oriented graduate students interested in applications when I came, and so soon after arrival I got to introduce a new graduate course in mathematical ecology. And we had well in the 20s in the math ecology, 20 students in the math ecology course when we started, and the next year I gave it we had 20 more, and so we were able to make a case that we needed an additional faculty member. Well, in 1979, a young, energetic, pleasant, outgoing scientist from Cornell who liked wild strawberries enough to write his dissertation on them, Lou Gross. That's a handsome picture, isn't it? Yeah, just off the web.
I looked much better when I was younger.
I think that's your director picture, Lou. But anyway, this is more like the Lou that we know, right? So with you read, I get to read too about you. Lou was added to our math faculty. Soon we were able to add a second year of mathematical ecology and an undergraduate biocalculus course, thanks to Lou's direction. Over the years, we were fortunate to hire many outstanding faculty members in both mathematics and EEB, and Lou set a high bar for future hires. One thing I remember about Lou's hiring process was I had to respond to perceived flags in one of his reference letters. The flag said that Lou is noted for his devotion to service outside the department. So mathematics being a very pure discipline, and our faculty was rather pure too, somehow was worried about that. Is he going to devote service to things outside the department or not? So I think I responded well to that. The support, I better read this because I don't want to be insulting. This particular view was not pervasive in the department, which was highly supportive to a math ecology group. But if you did have a purist attitude, my response to this question, this flag, is Lou is exactly the type of person that we want and need, someone who is concerned about nature and somebody concerned about service to mankind. So Lou remains faithful to those high objectives, even as he serves as director of NIMBUS and as a distinguished professor. So we did well with our first hire. Couldn't have done any better, Lou. Thank you. So who is this person? Aha. Suzanne came in, this date doesn't sound right, 1981? That's right. Okay. She still looks same as the day she arrived, very young. So she came in the area of control of PDEs, and after a while got interested in biology, and she's one of the stalwarts of the math department, serving as a university professor there. So one time I was giving a modeling talk. Excuse me again. My voice retired when I retired. So one time I was giving a modeling talk about a project, saying that I still preferred, whoops, I'm talking about models, but I ended with a picture of a young female model. Suzanne, you may not remember this, but Suzanne perhaps thought I was being a little sexist and moaned, and till I pointed out that this picture was that of my daughter Bethany. And Bethany is the blonde over here in the back row. So she happens to be in the audience today, so that's great. Okay, next we hired Steve Elmer. Steve joined the math department from 1982 to 1986, came here from Cornell, and is now back at Cornell. Steve was outstanding in teaching and research, but again, to show you that we had a few purists in the department. When he was recommended for promotion or tenure, I don't remember which, I just happened to remember the vote. The vote was 23 to 5. I can't imagine anybody voting not to tenure or retain Steve. So anyway, that just shows you that we did have a little bit of friction in the department, some purists around, and what we did, Steve's wife received her PhD, and they decided to leave so she could find a place of employment. And we imposed a requirement on anybody, faculty member who was going to leave the department, that what they had to do was to recommend somebody as good as they are or better. Well, Steve had been to Arizona, and sorry, Steve, he's not going to stay there very long, and he recommended hiring Mark Cott. Well, if you look at Mark's webpage, he came in 1987, and he says, Professor Cott has taught at the University of Tennessee or at the University of Washington since 1987. The reason he says that was he came, I think he was already married, right, Celeste? No. Okay. Well, okay. Well,
they came together, but they weren't.
Oh, okay. Well, actually, this year they celebrate their 25th wedding anniversary. So, Mark came here, stayed a few years, went to Washington where his wife was working in an outstanding department. He stayed there several years and then came back to Tennessee. He was here for several years. He went back to Washington. So you can understand his webpage. I guess he didn't want to bounce back between universities. So, well, guess who our next hire was? Our next hire was Sergei Gavrilets. Sergei has been a superstar since his arrival with his theory of holy evolutionary landscapes, one that competes with two more traditional theories. That is spelled H-O-L-E-Y, not H-O-L-Y. And he even wrote a book on the holy. Sorry, Sergei. It was on the web. Sergei was known for his academic prowess, his many invitations to travel, and his many acceptances of the invitations to travel. He remains at UT as an outstanding distinguished professor after many attempts to have hired him away. Our next hire, there's a good picture of Sergei on his travels. Aaron King was our next hire. Aaron stayed here 3 years before moving to Michigan, and his wife didn't like Knoxville, according to the story we got. But Aaron's interview was interesting. He wore a large beret for 2 days. I mean, it was big. And it took us a while to figure out that what he was doing was covering a monstrous set of dreadlocks. And the only thing we could rationalize that he must have been threatened by my hairstyle. And there was a time that we hired somebody by the name of Steve. And this was an interesting hire. He interviewed and looked good, and we were waiting for him to arrive in August. He did not arrive in August. He went to Scotland. And he notified us in August. So I've forgotten Steve's name, and he has actually disappeared. He's at least vanished into obscurity as far as I'm concerned. Well, some of our other faculty. Mike Gilchrist. I don't know whether Mike's here or not. Did he make it? No. That's okay. If you take the web and you put in Mike Gilchrist, this is what you get. Whoops. This is the person who gets all the notice on the web. But our Mike has been a great addition to the group. He was hired as kind of an informational specialist and has really evolved into a great computational biologist. So our next hire was Francisco Ubeda. Francisco was here only a few years. He had a son Paco, born in Knoxville. And Francisco looks somewhat like that. That's his web page photograph. Okay? So if you pull that up, that is true not only when he was in Knoxville, but also when he moved to London. He kind of looks like that guy, doesn't he? Anyway, Francisco, I got a note from him apologizing for not being here, but it turns out Diane is 35 weeks pregnant, so they're about to have a new Ubeda in the family to join Paco. So I think I saw Paul walk in, yeah. Paul joined our faculty in 2009, I think, and was granted part of my position, and he's really taken over the university. So, so I never had that desire, Paul, but you're doing a great job.
We need a new chancellor.
I think Paul has more sense than that. And Brian was back here. Brian O'Meara was my suite mate while his office was being prepared, and we enjoyed a great year together. Others have joined the UKT staff and other departments associated with NIMBUS. EEB continues with a strong emphasis on coupling theory with biology and an outstanding faculty in the area. One cannot solve the world's problems alone, and because problems with nature are complicated, combinations of abilities can help understand some of the best things that have come out of collaborations. And I've been fortunate to associate with many really bright, delightful folks in EEB and the math department for, as I said, many years. And the past 1.5 decades, I have been working with Gary McCracken. I don't know whether Gary made it or not. He's very busy, but that's good. I can say things about him. He's a world-renowned expert on bats and the world's top expert on free-tailed bats. He told me to tell you that. And we work so closely that Gary and I can give each other's talks. And I had speaking at a meeting in Berlin, or to speak at a meeting in Berlin, and was unable to go. And so the organizers asked Gary to give my talk. Well, Gary and I worked a bit before we went, and according to all reports, that was the best talk I ever gave. And that's according to Gary, of course. But anyway, interactions with folks have just been really a beneficial and blessed portion of my life, and I've enjoyed that tremendously. Lou has already mentioned some of the I have to show Gary's picture. That's him as administrator. Come in there, Gary. This is the real Gary. But notice he's using gloves to hold the bat. So that's a very good thing. Okay, major events in the department. In the 1980s and 1990s, in Trieste, Italy, at the Institute for Theoretical Physics, Lou, Simon Levin, and I directed many courses and workshops in math theoretical ecology, primarily for scientists from developing countries. These workshops and courses reached approximately 1,500 participants from all over the world. And those courses changed their lives, and more importantly, I think, or as importantly, it changed our lives, those of us who were directors and lecturers at the courses. It was just an unbelievable experience to see the eager, bright folks that exist all over the world, and we have many benefits here that they do not have, but they're still working as hard as we're working, if not harder. So that was, as I said, this was at the International Center for Theoretical Physics. That's not the International Center for Theoretical Physics, but this is on the grounds very close to the center, and this is oftentimes where we would stroll between breaks, or during breaks, and during lunch and so forth. Actually, it turns out a version of our courses still continues in a different institute in Trieste today by some of the younger folks that came up through our courses as lecturers or so forth. And the next probably big event that we had was the Institute of Environmental Modeling, which was developed with the primary function to accommodate and facilitate interactions with people from Oak Ridge. The Institute was really a valuable entity for us to fund proposals through it, to bring some folks in from Oak Ridge, and it exists today as a viable institute. Some of the original staff of team are still around, and in fact, they form primary staff at NIMBUS. And I think that Chris and Jane, Michael, Eric must have tenure at UT. They've been here so long and never taught a course, but they may have, I don't know. Anyway, we've been blessed to have these folks around. The next event I wanted to mention was there's a group of 4 theoretical types that moved major appointments from math to EEB soon after EEB was formed as an academic department. This story probably merits a few comments. And EEB was formed about 20 years ago with Sandy Echternaut moving from zoology, a department that was disbanded as head, to the formational head of EEB. And at the same time, the math ecology group was having troubles. Troubles with a relatively new head in the math department who came from an external position, and it was the case that he didn't know our culture. So I don't think he really appreciated applied mathematics and a particular applied mathematics group that was in the math department. This group I'm talking about appreciated mathematics very much. We appreciated the applied portions more, and we strongly supported development of mathematics, but we were more interested in the applied problem. So that may have been part of our philosophy that was not embraced by the new head. At that particular time, and for several years previously, the math ecology group was bringing in 75% of the external funds into the department. So this was an unusual situation. This particular head did some weird things, like developing and approving regulations that applied to our group. At least once he developed and approved a regulation that applied to one person in the group, me. So anyway, that was not the reason that we changed. What happened next was the reason that we got motivated to do something. Turns out that he tapped one of our grants for some funds without permission. We had a kind staff member who thought this was probably inappropriate, and she was right. It is illegal. So department heads don't have access to funded, external funded money if you're not the principal investigator of that. So anyway, we decided that this was the coup de grace, which made us feel like that we probably should decide to do something one way or another. Our best option was that we probably could move easily to EEB. We approached them with the possibility, and they welcomed us with open arms. But on the other hand, we felt like our group needed access to some applied math students. And so moving over there, we don't have that source of students. So what we did was to keep a partial appointment in mathematics, but primarily move to EEB. So I think everybody but me still continues in that situation with, I think Lou and Sergei have appointments still in math. I did not, whenever I took over as head of the EEB department, I did not feel like I needed another department head deciding things for me, and so I moved completely to EEB. But as we were planning to move and going through the channels to move, lots of interesting things happened. One situation that occurred with me was that I got a call from the associate head for research in the arts and sciences. And he requested, actually, I think he demanded that I come in. And so I did go in, and he said, "You know what you're doing to the math department?" And I said, "Well, I think we know what will happen in terms of our situation relative to the math department, but I don't think the head knows." And he actually said that we're going to destroy the math department. Well, fortunately, we did not do that. I mean, the math department still exists as a viable unit, but we felt a little guilty about leaving the friendly confines of the math department, but we felt like we had no choice. Okay, the final major event I want to talk about is the culmination of hard work by many in this room. Lou, Sergei, Suzanne, and the others, with the strong support of the university, led to the NIMBUS proposal and soon being funded. So one interesting side effect of the way the proposal was written led to the hiring of a faculty member in a slot that the dean's office tried to take back. Lou had very cleverly written the position in as a contribution from EEB, but he had 5 other positions already given to him by the university. So the dean's office thought that this was a little much in the way of contributions, and so they tried to take one position back, but it was written in as a contribution from EEB, and we have a faculty member here in this audience who benefited from that position not being rescinded and not being reneged and all. In terms of NIMBUS, one of the the first workshop that was held under the auspices of NIMBUS, Gary and I had the pleasure of organizing, and it was on bats. Bats infected by white nose syndrome in particular. It's caused by a fungus, and if you look at the noses of those bats, I haven't used the pointer, and Eric worked really hard to get me to figure it out. See the noses? That's the weirdest named disease I have ever heard. But white nose syndrome, you got a fungus on your nose. I mean, but that fungus goes on their wings, it goes all over their body, and it is deadly. This, well, I'll get back to white nose a little bit later, but we ended up with probably the best and continuing workers in the area of white nose at that workshop, and had lots of excellent recommendations and directions of research, and many of those still have not been solved. So the workshop, I think, was just a delight. We had super people here and made great progress. Okay. Well, I've talked about faculty, and what I want to do is to get to some of our graduate students. And again, I don't think we've got many in the audience, but I'm just doing a few to make a few points. So actually, our group has been blessed with many outstanding students and postdoc associates, and I'm not even going to talk about the postdocs. They're an outstanding group as well, but I didn't want to take too much of your time, and I'm already running short, so sorry about talking so long. This is our first math ecology graduate in 1981, Linda Allen. She was the first female hired at Texas Tech University Department of Mathematics. She's the first female full professor at Texas Tech in mathematics. She is the first female distinguished scientist in the math department at Texas Tech. Linda was just absolutely super. That's her and her daughter. In 1986, we had our first theoretical ecology PhD graduates. That's Carol Hallam. Carol is at Davis, UC Davis, and teaches and runs student grants there, student-oriented grants. At the same time, Betsy Cochran also finished her degree. Carol worked on salamanders. Betsy worked on lady slippers, and both Carol and Betsy are outstanding teachers. Betsy was for a while the dean of something or other. Let me see. The Louisiana Scholars College at Northeastern State University. And interesting thing about Betsy, she still comes back and keeps track of her lady slippers. So it's been a while. She's got a long running. Jolly. Now I'm going through a series here rather quickly, and I'll make the point after showing you four or so. Jolly got his degree in 87. He's at Alabama. This is Osme Oakley. He got his degree in 93. He's at Louisiana. This is Osme. A little later in his life, notice he's not smiling like Osme was earlier. That's because he's now a dean. Shondell. There's Shondell. She got her degree in, she's in Michigan now in 94. And there she is. She's leaning her head against something. She's still got a big smile. But she's a department head. Graciela has been an associate dean, and she has been a department head. Actually, she got her degree in ecology. She's been a department head in the math department in Argentina. Okay. Well, my point here is that we've had a lot of super students, and we've had a lot that have gone into administration. And so you sometimes worry about them as administrators, but they were extremely good researchers. They're great teachers, and I'm proud of all of them. And I like to think I taught them proper academic and career procedures. In general, I tried to emphasize a couple of things. One, that our objectives are to hopefully advance the understanding of nature and make this earth a better place for all of us. And two, there are a few reasons to be an administrator at a university. And one grace, saving grace of being an administrator, is that you can do some help for some people. And that makes the jobs worthwhile for those of you who are going to eventually move into administration. There are some redeeming factors to the position. Sometimes you even make a little bit more money. Not that that matters. But basically, when I was talking to them about their futures, I would mention the best decision I ever made academically was when I was an associate professor. I'd been out 7 years. I got an offer to be head of a department that I had just visited. And at more than twice the salary that I was making, I turned them down. So, best decision I ever made academically. So, and in terms of convincing my students they should avoid administration, I think I showed you that I failed horribly as a mentor. But Lou mentioned that I became such a creature as well, so not by choice, but okay. A couple more things and then I will quit. Interdisciplinary and industrial training. We have been very fortunate. Cindy Crone, her name was Loveland when she was here. Dina Lika, Graziella Canziani, Paula Federico. These are students who have had interesting careers from the viewpoint that they've changed their points of emphasis. Cindy was an applied math major from day one. her teaching assistantship was with a consulting company. So it was primarily research. She did a little teaching for us at our insistence. But she got her PhD, went to work for Intel. And after working for close to a decade with Intel, 16 hours a day, 6 days a week, bothered her and her husband. He was also working at Intel. And they decided to leave. Cindy went to culinary school. And she was outstanding in mathematics, and she was outstanding in culinary school. She and her mentor in culinary school entered one of the TV cake baking contests and won. So Cindy now spends her time actually in Knoxville and taking care of 3 little ones. So Dina got her PhD in mathematics. She was hired in a biology department in Greece and has been there ever since. Graciela got her degree at EEB, was head of a department in mathematics. Paula got her degree in EEB and is in a math statistics department in Ohio. Okay, I don't have a picture of Cindy. Those are people with industrial experience. Yetta is at ESD at Oak Ridge National Lab. Tom is at EPA, working as a scientist there. Jeff, I had to mention, Jeff has been here in and out longer than anyone in this room. That's not quite right. But he worked on his PhD, was close to finishing, went out and worked 10 years for Jewelry Network in computer science, and then came back, finished his PhD, and then went to Oak Ridge National Lab in ESD for a while, and he is now doing Homeland Security computations. So, okay, I'm closing. This is my last slide, guys, so you can rest. I'm going to quit. 1, some of my lessons. The culture of research academia requires those of us who know little to be kept fresh by those new folks that are hired to bring different skills to attack problems, and those colleagues who are willing to put up with us in our quirks and study with us together. 2, always hire people that have the abilities to be better and brighter than you and have the character to improve the working group. It's important to keep your best people, but if they leave, replace them with folks who are or have the promise to achieve better than whoever is departing. That's kind of an optimistic goal, but we have done that here at Tennessee. Train your students to do first whatever they find exciting, but insist that they also see and use perspectives other than the obvious and traditional. Breadth is important. They never know what kind of job they will end up with. Some will even be administrators. If departments and or their administrations are territorial or have a narrow vision, especially to what the world is about, that perspective is not conducive to interdisciplinary studies. Try to change that, and if unsuccessful, leave. Coming from a background of many years in aquatic ecotoxicology and diseases of bats, a big concern I have is when humans modify nature, especially in areas that are not well understood. Extremely unpredictable events can occur. For example, survivors of chemical stress are basically unpredictable. Some hibernating bat species are threatened by extinction by white nose syndrome simply because of the fact that a human went into a cave importing fungus that was extremely harmful to them. And actually for that disease, I can't imagine mankind being able to cure it. Our only flying mammal is just too hard to treat. Nature will have to solve that one. The most dangerous events against nature and human survival are those propagated by humans. We have evolved to be the most hazardous of all species. In general, the human race is not prone to rapidly understand new events. And things like AIDS, there's circumstantial evidence that in the 30s to 50s that AIDS was around, and humans did things that merely spread the disease, and I'm not talking about the sexual aspects. For example, vaccinations for malaria using unclean needles, that probably caused the initial spread worse than the sexual contacts. So, resistance to change is an unfortunate evolved attribute of the human race. Things like denial of global climate change and the media, things that go with that. We're not signees of the Kyoto Protocol, and the reason for that is our president said Americans do not want to change their living standard. I think that's wrong. But then, as a species, we do not often think deeply. Sometimes individual in power do not think at all. And it's our personal and scientific responsibility to do all we can to help this world and organisms, especially we humans, survive. So, good luck. You young folks have a lot on your plate. And thank you.